in San Francisco and went to Jerusalem to do a documentary project with funding from KQED for a project called Jerusalem, A Living History. And while there, we got two translators, a Palestinian translator and an Israeli translator. And I got to be pretty good friends with Khalil, our Palestinian, and after the production was over, I stayed in Jerusalem. And Khalil took me into the West Bank to introduce me to his family and took me literally all over the West Bank. And I realized during that trip that the Palestinian story really wasn't being told, and kind of made a commitment to Khalil and myself that with any media skills that I might have, I would try to do projects to try to tell the Palestinian story as best I could. And it's been a struggle, and I've done 3 documentaries, virtually all out of the country in the UK and abroad, but not in the US. But all the time have been shooting and producing for what you watched just now, for a documentary that was originally called Inshallah, Inshallah being a term that you hear all the time in the Middle East, meaning if Allah so wills it, God willing. And about 3 or 4 years ago, we had enough material to do an edit under the title Inshallah, which was basically profiles of people living in Gaza, and did a series of screenings, very much like the screening that you all watched tonight. And the biggest response that always came back was, well, it was great to see these people and meet these people, but the big underlying story was why this situation allows to continue. And I didn't have an answer for that. There was no real logical answer why Gaza and the occupation and the siege continued unabated. So I did a crowdsourcing funding, got a little bit more money, and was able to do a lot more taping. And it took me to Germany and the Czech Republic to go to some of the Nazi camps. I was able to spend a good deal amount of time in Israel itself and did a lot more taping. And then started to edit and had a setback with just some personal health issues. Had a heart attack that I obviously have made it through, and some other health issues, but that set the project back, and then the pandemic hit, and that put everything on hold for quite a while. And then about 6-7 months ago, just as October 7th was happening, we had an edit that was in really good shape, we felt, and started to do festival distribution. And then October 7th happened, and we really had to start with a clean sheet of paper. And fortunately, we found an individual from the Middle East who owns a construction company who has been supporting us financially to help finish the project. And so you guys are all part of the process, because we're very close. Barbara and I are going to be going to Australia in the next week, where Rami and Atif are. You met Rami in the video you just saw. And we're all going to work on doing the final editing and tweak it and get it in good shape. So what you guys have seen are just bits and pieces of scenes from the documentary, but now we have all these pieces of puzzle lying on the table that we all have to put together. And so feedback or questions or anything you want to ask me, please, we're totally open. And I hope, you know, you guys enjoyed what you saw, or maybe not enjoyed isn't the best word, but appreciated what you saw and have a little bit more of an insight into Gaza and who lives there. So I'm, like I said, I'm open for any comments or questions that any of you might have. I hope that answers the question. It was kind of a long answer.
Maurice, I did talk to them about this being a collaboration, and I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit more, especially in terms of how the footage has been coming to us these last months.
Sure. Well, for the first 3 months, Rami and his father Atif and their company, the media group, were in Gaza, were inside the siege. And they were working with their crew, a camera person whose name is Amir Sultan. And Amir is a big physical guy and just kind of pretty fearless camera guy and very good technically. And he was shooting literally every day and feeding footage not only to us, but to the BBC and other outlets that the media group was working with. And then the situation really got, as we all know, got worse and worse and worse. And Rami and Atif had to leave their offices in Gaza City, which had already been destroyed, and they were just working out of a small temporary office. But they had to leave there, made it to Rafah, where, like everyone else, were living in a tent. But Rami was still shooting, and Amir was still shooting. And they were literally going to the border, right next to the fence in Egypt, and were able to hook onto a cell tower in Egypt, and were able to WeTransfer and WhatsApp send back footage. So we have really an incredible amount of footage that they were able to send up until about a month ago when things really fell apart. And the internet went down and apparently Israel blocked the internet coverage at the Rafah crossing. And it's pretty much of a blackout. But Rami and his family, his wife and 3 kids, and Atif and his wife, and a whole bunch of other relatives, because of their work with the BBC, were able to leave. And Atif and Rami already had family in Australia, in Melbourne, Australia, so they were able to get visas. And about a month ago now, were able to fly to Australia. But Rami and I and his father, we've been working together pretty much consistently since the first time I went into Gaza physically, which was way back in 2010. And I've been back 3 times since then, and I've stayed at their house. And we have a really pretty close, warm relationship as collaborators, but as also friends.
Okay. Does anyone have questions for Maurice?
I have one.
Yeah.
How does he feel about the support going on at the universities of climate change?
Great question. Okay. So Maurice, can you tell us how you feel about the support from the universities, the student protest, and maybe how the artists and your other Gazan contacts might be feeling about those situations?
Well, being an old hippie and being old enough to be when I was very active during the protests during the Vietnam era, and, you know, participated in the May Day demonstrations in Washington, where we really tried to do the same thing that demonstrators are doing now, is to stop business as usual until the war in Vietnam wrapped down. And so that whole period of time really literally changed the direction of my life and the social activism that I've been dealing for the last, 40, 50, 60 years. And so I'm sure that students at Humboldt and all the universities where there are protests going on demanding a ceasefire, demanding divestiture, is going to affect you all, you students, the same way it affected me personally. And once you see the other side, once you see what the system of capitalism and the system of individualism as opposed to collective energy can do to suppress people, you can't turn your back. And so I, am 100% obviously supportive of what's going on the college campuses. For the artists, trying to make their artwork available to you all as a reminder that these are artists who are creating under incredibly difficult situations. Mesa is still in Gaza. Basel is still in Gaza at a refugee camp in a tent. In Rafah, he might have had to leave. We've been in communication with his son, who is in Egypt, and apparently his son can't connect with his father or any of his family anymore inside. But if you go to Facebook, and you can see Basel has been teaching artwork to kids. He's been creating a lot more work. Layla was feeding all her neighbors. She had a house in Rafah, so didn't have to move. But apparently, a few weeks ago, felt that it was not safe there, even though she had a house. And she's apparently in Egypt now too. And Malik, who is 23, 24 years old, and is going to be world famous. She's studying now, has a full scholarship to the most prestigious art school in London, and has been turning out just incredible pieces of work. And you saw a little of it in the film that you see. So being able to support the artists by paying, some of their artwork, and that money is going back to the artists after, we pay whatever small expenses there were to print them and package them up. But we are sending money back, and I know they're supportive 100% of the protests that are going on. And, it's all reciprocal. Whatever you guys can do to help them, I know the energy is going both ways.
Any other questions? Yeah.
How did you land on the new title?
What was the question?
How did you land on the new title?
Of the artwork?
Oh, of the film.
Of the film, okay, yeah. Maurice, do you want to talk a little bit about how you came across, decided on the name of this film project?
We all live in Gaza?
Yes.
Well, I mean, to me, Gaza is all of our responsibility. If any of you have been to the Martin Luther King Memorial in Washington, D.C., a lot of Martin Luther King's famous sayings are there, and one of the things that struck me really, really heavily was his letter from Birmingham when he was in jail. And one of the things he wrote in that very famous letter was, injustice anywhere affects all of us. And so I feel really strongly that what the United States is doing and what Israel is doing as a Jewish nation, which proposes to be a moral, righteous entity, is hypocrisy. And we have to fight that hypocrisy wherever we can, through the media, through our protests, through whatever lobbying work we can do with Congress. And so it's all our responsibility, and that's why I feel not only is the name of the title, We All Live in Gaza, because almost everyone you see in the documentary is from Gaza, but it's also, I strongly believe it's all our responsibility to try to end what's going on. And to me, the world has changed. It's never going to be the same after October 7th. Our international relations are going to be different. Attitudes towards the country of Israel are going to change. And for the Palestinians, in a very ironic way, they look at what's happening in a positive light because they know now that the Palestinians are being recognized as individuals, as a potential nation. And they're looking beyond this terrible situation that they're in to a day where they will obviously and honestly have a state of their own. How that state will exist, what the parameters are going to be, no one knows. Absolutely no one knows. But there is a sense of optimism in not only beyond their terrible situation, but they are looking ahead, and they feel like the student protests and the awareness of the media in the long term is going to help their cause.
Any other questions? One last question. Just to wrap this up, Maurice, do you want to talk a little bit about the direction of where this bill is going now? You did speak about the editing in Australia. What are your hopes for distribution and impact?
Well, I mean, there's a fantasy idea, but it's really not a fantasy idea because I think, you know, with the inclusion of Dr. Cornel West and other support that I think we're generating along the way, is that we'd like to do what's called a cinema event, where we have a one-day screening of the documentary that's fed to 300, 400, 500 theaters internationally, where we show the full 90-minute documentary. It's hosted by Dr. West, and then afterwards, people all over the world, literally, can text in questions to the participants in the documentary who we can tie in by Zoom or by satellite and have a real conversation. So it would be like a 2-3 hour event, which would be beamed to theaters literally all over. Now, obviously doing that is going to take a huge amount of work, and between the time that we finish the edit of the documentary, which hopefully will be at the end of June, that gives us all the time during the presidential campaign, July, August, September, to do community screenings exactly like we're doing now. But instead of showing just bits and pieces of the documentary, we'll have the whole documentary that we could show. And, you know, we're totally open to, you know, being able to show it in community centers and churches. And I really hope we can get into some synagogues and, you know, open up a dialogue with the Jewish community. But, you know, we'll try as best we can to get it distributed as widely as we can. Hopefully get some celebrity support that'll help move the process along. It's just we're just doing tiny baby steps now. And I hope that we're able to move the project along, you know, to start running a marathon, so to speak.
All right, any last questions? Oh, there's one more, yeah.
I was curious if they have any content or filming or collaboration with the Freedom Theater.
Where is the Freedom Theater?
At the Jenin refugee camp.
Jenin?
Yeah.
Oh, right, yeah, that's a great
Does
question.
the Freedom Theater still exist?
Yeah,
Or
the
has it
Freedom
been
Theater,
destroyed?
Janine, let's see. Their question is if there's any collaboration with that theater, with this project.
Of course not.
Well, not directly, although I did tape there, and spent some time with the staff there about 4 or 5 years ago. From what I understand, though, over the years, with what's been happening in Jenin, the theater isn't operating right now. But it was a very vibrant community where they were doing English plays as well as plays in Arabic. And there's a strong artist community in Jenin as well. But the city of Jenin and the refugee camp apparently has just been decimated. And the theater, if you know the Freedom Theater, is literally in the refugee camp. It's not, it's right adjacent. And so I fear that it physically might be in shambles. And from what I understand, it's not a functioning entity now, but, you know, I do have email addresses for a lot of the staff people, and would love to communicate as best we can. There's been a parallel project, if any of you know it. There's a community in the West Bank, not far from Jenin, called El Aqaba. And El Aqaba, every house in the village is under demolition orders. And there's been an international campaign to save the village. And I lived in the village for 6 months and did 2 documentaries from there for Press TV. And Press TV was the Iranian, or is the Iranian public service broadcaster. But unfortunately, those documentaries never made it to the U.S. And actually, in both of those documentaries, there were people from the Freedom Theater. So, yeah, we've definitely been in contact. But for this documentary, we all live in Gaza. It was pretty much decided there's so much material from Gaza itself not to focus any attention on the Middle East or on the West Bank or Jenin or the Jordan Valley.
Okay, so I think that's it. Maurice, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate your coming to talk about the project.
Sure, my pleasure. Hope you all enjoyed it, and you know, any feedback you can give to Barbara, suggestions of you know, things that you liked in the screening that you saw, or things that you kind of missed seeing that you think should be added, just let us know, because literally a week from today, we'll be all together in Melbourne, Australia, you know, editing the project.
Great, thank you, Maurice.
Okay, take care of you all. As they say in the Middle East, ma salama, which means go in peace.